3 days before her wedding, a photograph arrived that was never meant for her. Three days before her wedding, a photograph arrived that was never meant for her. Maya held it in her hands, a single Polaroid, edges worn soft from being touched too many times. In it, a woman stood in front of a small restaurant in Busan, her smile wide and unguarded. The handwriting on the back was in Korean, but Maya didn't need to read it. She knew what it said. June had translated it for her once, months ago, when they still believed love could be enough. To my son, may you always choose honor over heart. She hadn't told him the photo came. She wouldn't. Not now. Not when his mother's plane was landing in 2 hours, and the wedding was set for Saturday, and everything they'd built together was hanging by a thread so thin she could feel it fraying in her chest. Maya Kim, she'd taken his last name in her heart long before the paperwork, was not supposed to be here. Not in this apartment in Seoul with its narrow windows and the smell of sesame oil always lingering in the air. Not in love with a man whose family saw her as a mistake dressed in good intentions. She was American, black. An English teacher who'd come to Korea on a 1-year contract and stayed because of a man who looked at her like she was both the question and the answer. June didn't know she'd been crying. He was in the kitchen making tea the way his grandmother taught him. Slow, deliberate, like every motion mattered. That's how he did everything. Carefully. As if the world might break if he moved too fast. Maya, he called softly. The casual intimacy of the Korean suffix still made her heart twist. Come sit. She folded the photograph into her pocket and joined him at the low table. He poured the tea in silence, his hands steady. June was beautiful in a quiet way. Sharp jawline softened by gentle eyes, black hair falling just slightly over his forehead. He wore simple clothes, a gray sweater, dark jeans. He looked like someone who belonged in poetry, not conflict. She'll come around, he said, though they both knew he didn't believe it. Maya wrapped her hands around the warm cup. Your mother sent me a photo. His hands stilled. It's you and her. Outside her restaurant. You're maybe 7 years old. Maya's voice was soft, careful. On the back, she wrote something about honor. June closed his eyes. When he opened them, the pain there was so raw she almost looked away. She thinks I'm choosing you over her. Aren't you? The question hung between them like smoke. Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. Once. 3 times. He glanced at the screen and something in his face shifted. A door closing, a light going out. She's early, he whispered. She's at the airport. She wants me to come alone. Maya felt the floor tilt beneath her. June. I have to go. Then I'm coming with you. Maya. His voice cracked on her name. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers, and for a moment she saw everything they were about to lose reflected in his eyes. Please. Let me talk to her first. Let me try. She wanted to argue, wanted to stand up and say that love shouldn't require this much surrender. But she saw the way his shoulders curved inward, the way his breath came shallow and tight, and she knew. He was drowning too. Okay, she whispered. He stood, kissed the top of her head. Too quick, too light, like he was already half gone, and left. The apartment was silent except for the distant sound of traffic and her own heartbeat. Maya pulled the photograph from her pocket again. Stared at the woman in it. June's mother had his eyes. The same shape, the same sadness buried beneath duty. Her phone buzzed. Message. From a number she didn't recognize. Korean characters filled the screen, but at the bottom, in careful English. If you love my son, you will let him go. Some loves are not meant to survive. Maya's hand shook. Another message arrived. This time an image. It was a plane ticket. Unway. Los Angeles to Seoul. Dated for Sunday morning, the day after the wedding. Her name was on it. But she hadn't booked it. The door to the apartment opened. June stood in the doorway, his face pale. His eyes wide with something that looked like fear. She's here, he said. In the car. Downstairs. Maya's throat tightened. What did you tell her? He stepped inside, closed the door behind him, and when he looked at her, she saw the answer before he spoke. She wants to meet you, he whispered. Right now. Next episode. In the car downstairs. Soon he will ask a question that will change everything. Some meetings don't end in understanding. They end in ultimatums.